Have you ever felt that some voices don't belong to this world? That something can slip so deeply inside you that even the strongest begin to doubt their own sanity? Today, you're going to hear stories that neither doctors nor priests dared to speak about publicly. Stories of possession so real, so intense, they could shake even the most skeptical heart. And maybe, just maybe, some of them will make you question whether a true boundary between good and evil even exists. But first, a warning. If you're comfortable there in your room, lights off, headphones on full volume, perfect. But pay attention, because some of these voices don't just want to be heard. They want to be felt. They slip into the corners of your mind, into the chill that crawls up your spine, into that creak of wood you swear you heard right behind you. If you've ever witnessed something unexplainable, or if you simply enjoy the rush of your heart pounding for a moment, send in your story. Who knows? It might show up in our next episode, because here, there's no escape. And if you enjoy true horror, based on real events, make sure to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Now, prepare yourself. You're about to hear 3 real possessions, 3 cases that defy logic, medicine, and even faith. And they all began in ways so small, so subtle, that no one would suspect what was about to unfold. The first story begins in Klingenberg, Germany, at the heart of a devout Catholic household. Anneliese. Michelle was just 16 years old when the first shadows appeared in her life. They weren't ordinary nightmares, nor the fruit of adolescent fantasy. They were subtle presences, almost imperceptible, watching her as she slept. It all began with sleep paralysis, that sensation when your body refuses to obey, but you're fully conscious of everything. Along with it came strange smells, odors no one else could sense. Small whispers, so soft they blended with the wind, until they didn't anymore. Anneliese insisted these weren't dreams. They were waiting. And then came the visions. Figures with hollow eyes, black as coal, lurking in the corners of her room. Always watching. Always silent. Doctors diagnosed her with temporal lobe epilepsy, trying to explain the seizures, the voices, the aggressive and self-destructive behavior. But nothing worked. With each day, the voices grew stronger. You are damned. You belong to us. That's what she heard. Guttural, distorted whispers dripping with ancient rage. Anneliese began to hurt herself, scratching her own face, tearing her clothes. She slept on the cold floor, whispered screams echoing through the night. Her eyes darkened with hate and terror. And then came a strength that could not be natural. She lifted heavy objects with unnatural ease, hurled people across the room when they tried to restrain her. Every human intervention seemed useless. The voices began to speak in unison, or in multiple tones at once, a cacophony of malice that filled every corner of the house. Her parents, desperate, turned to the church. Nearly 12 months of silent pleas and growing torment passed before 2 priests were finally sent to attempt the impossible, to confront the evil that had taken hold of Anneliese. What they found defies any rational description. A young woman speaking fluent Latin without ever having studied, whistling mockingly at crucifixes, convulsing violently at the touch of holy water. A presence so intense that even men of faith questioned their own sanity. The first sessions began relatively formally. 2 seasoned priests, armed with prayers, crucifixes, and holy water, entered the small room where Anneliese was confined. But no one was prepared for what came next. As soon as the priests began reciting, Anneliese convulsed violently, as if invisible forces were pulling her body in every direction. The floor seemed to tremble beneath her legs. Her hands clawed into the mattress with inhuman strength, scraping the wood until her skin tore open. And then the voices began. First one, then another, until they multiplied, speaking all at once. A deep guttural tone, barely recognizable as human, yet each distinct in its intent, to take control. I am Lucifer. I rule over the others. She belongs to us now. The voice echoed through the room, seeping through walls, piercing into the minds of everyone present. Even the priests felt the weight of evil, a cutting cold that seemed to drain faith from their hearts. For hours, Annalisa barked, crawled, bit into the wooden floor, and growled words that no one could understand, mixed with recognizable phrases in Latin. She vomited, defiled herself, and still she fought on with a ferocity no human body could sustain. The exorcisms grew longer and more exhausting. Some lasted over 4 hours without pause. Session after session, Annalisa became physically weaker, but paradoxically more intense psychologically. At times, it seemed that every demon inside her, Lucifer, Cain, Nero, Judas Iscariot, Adolf Hitler, and a nameless sixth, fought for control of her soul. Each day, her parents watched in horror as their daughter wasted away from starvation, convinced that fasting might weaken the demons. Her knees bled from endless kneeling, her hands twisted in ceaseless prayer, and every word that left her mouth seemed layered. 2, 3, sometimes more voices speaking at once. In one taped session, the priests clearly heard a voice. That was not Annalisa's. Guttural, deep, unnatural. You are not stronger than Christ. Come here. Take her. Take her. You are not strong. No, you are not stronger than Christ. Even for the most seasoned priests, hearing something like that was enough to shake the core of their faith. But they pressed on, determined to protect her soul. With each session, the terror intensified. Annalisa broke free of restraints, spoke languages she had never learned, snarled like wild animals, and at times burst into insane laughter that echoed through the halls, reverberating as though the air itself had turned dark and alive. And even when the demons seemed to dominate, there were moments of silence. An absolute silence so heavy that everyone knew something worse was about to happen. As the months dragged on, Annalise became almost unrecognizable. Her once healthy body turned frail, covered in bruises, scratches, and wasted muscles from endless convulsions and impossible contortions. Each exorcism drained what little energy remained, yet paradoxically seemed to strengthen the presence that consumed her mind. The voices no longer merely spoke words. They screamed, howled, threatened, each one fighting not only for her soul, but seemingly for dominion over the world she still barely touched. You are damned. You belong to us. The roar shook the ceiling, rattled the walls, echoing in the minds of everyone present. The priests wrote down everything in detail, but even they, accustomed to the supernatural, trembled when they heard that voice, ancient, guttural, and undeniably inhuman. Annalise began refusing food, convinced starvation could weaken the demons. Her knees bled raw from constant kneeling, her trembling hands clutching crucifixes and rosaries, as though they were her last defense against the evil trying to consume her completely. Each day was a war between body and spirit, between faith and terror. In one recorded session, Annalisa thrashed so violently that the priests had to hold her down with all their strength. Her voice suddenly shifted, from the soft tone of a young woman to a deep, animalistic growl. She crawled across the floor, biting into the wood, and at one point licked her own vomit, a grotesque display of desperation and possession. Her parents watched in silence, unable to intervene, powerless before something that defied every human explanation. They could no longer distinguish where their beloved daughter ended, and the entity feeding on her body and soul began. Annalisa began to reveal names and stories no one could possibly know. Intimate details about priests, hidden sins of community members, things that were never meant to be spoken aloud. Every word rolled off her tongue with terrifying clarity, even as her frail body seemed ready to give out. With each session, the demonic presence grew more aggressive. Annalisa lifted heavy objects, hurled chairs, whistled at crucifixes, spat on prayers, and at times spoke in several voices simultaneously. She claimed that 6 entities were fighting for control of her soul: Lucifer, Cain, Nero, Judas Iscariot, Adolf Hitler, and a sixth without a name, one she herself refused to utter. The priests pressed on, exhausted but resolute. Session after session, they confronted a young woman who no longer seemed human, consumed more and more by the evil within. And then came the last night of July, 1976. Annalisa was unbearably weak, weighing only 68 pounds. Her body was covered in wounds, her face frozen in an expression that blended agony with a strange peace. Surrounded by religious icons, crucifixes and rosaries, she lay motionless, as if she had finally surrendered. By the time the priests realized it, it was too late. Annalise Michel died that night, leaving behind a legacy of terror that still haunts the world today. Her grave, surrounded by stories and whispered accounts, continues to attract visitors who claim to hear voices and see strange figures lingering nearby. And the question remains, was Annalisa truly possessed? Or was she simply a broken human mind, torn apart by illnesses that defy medical explanation? In the quiet province of Natal, South Africa, something began to stir at a Catholic missionary school. These were not rumors, not the fearful tales of children. This was real. Her name was Clara Germana, a 16-year-old girl, bright and reserved, raised by missionaries after the death of her parents. She was known for her devotion to faith, a flawless teenager in both behavior and spirituality. Until one morning, she approached a priest with a confession that changed everything. "I made a pact with the devil." Simple words, spoken with a calmness that did not match the horror to come. Within days, Clara transformed completely. Her once serene gaze turned cold, burning with hatred and rage. She snarled at nuns and students, attacking them with inhuman strength, scratching, tearing clothing and wounding her own skin. And then came the languages no one had taught her: Latin, Polish, German. Ancient words and guttural sounds that tore through the air, echoing through the school's corridors. One nun wrote in her diary, "The Clara we knew no longer exists. Something else speaks through her." Her strength was superhuman. She lifted furniture effortlessly, threw people to the floor, broke bones. The voices within her shifted in tone, sometimes childlike, sometimes guttural, always threatening, always strange. Her body reacted to invisible commands that seemed to come from another world. And then came the levitation. Clara floated nearly 5 feet above the ground, arms outstretched, eyes rolled back. More than a dozen nuns and students witnessed the phenomenon. One student fainted at the sight of terror incarnate. Others fled, screaming. Her skin flushed, feverish, and every scream seemed to suck the air from the room. At night, she screamed for hours, cursing God, threatening to burn down the entire school. Whenever someone tried to use holy water, Clara convulsed violently, as if consumed by invisible flames. Her eyes, fixed on those around her, radiated an animalistic fury that no one could ignore. Beyond physical violence, Clara began revealing hidden secrets about priests and nuns, things no one believed she could possibly know. Every detail spilled from her mouth like a direct accusation, in a guttural, otherworldly voice. The situation escalated quickly. 2 priests were called to intervene. What they encountered would haunt them forever. A young girl who was no longer human, who attacked her exorcists, biting, spitting, laughing in a voice that was not her own. During one session, Clara recited words a priest had whispered privately the night before, knowledge she could never have had. And then, suddenly, silence. Clara collapsed, exhausted, but when she awoke, her voice had returned to normal. She claimed to remember nothing. The possession was over, but the trauma, physical and psychological, lingered in the school and in the minds of all who witnessed it. One nun abandoned her vows entirely, declaring in terror, "I saw it, and that child's face, I will never forget it." Even years later, the case of Clara Germana remains one of the most documented and credible possessions ever recorded, with dozens of witnesses and no convincing medical explanation. Maryland, 1949. A 13-year-old boy, known under the pseudonym Roland Doe, was mourning the death of his aunt, the woman who had been his safe haven, the one who had introduced him to the Ouija board. Soon after her passing, strange events began to unfold in Roland's home. At first, it was scratching behind the walls. Faint sounds, almost imperceptible, yet impossible to ignore at night. Then, footsteps echoing down the empty hallway. Objects began to move on their own. Chairs dragging, books falling from shelves, knives leaping from the kitchen. Everything seemed to follow a pattern, as though an invisible presence was watching and orchestrating every move. And then, Roland began to change. He awoke with deep scratches across his body, sometimes forming words. Evil, or I am Legion. His voice shifted, becoming deep, guttural, inhuman. He whistled at crucifixes, spat on prayers, and flew into uncontrollable rage at the sight of any religious object. His parents, desperate, sought help from doctors and psychiatrists. None could explain the phenomena. That's when they turned to the church. A priest attempted a simple blessing. What followed was a session of absolute terror. Roland screamed, hurled chairs, attacked the priest, and displayed superhuman strength. The case escalated. Roland was moved to St. Louis, where two priests, including Father William Bowden, began a full exorcism. The sessions were violent. He thrashed, tore out of restraints, spat, cursed, and laughed in multiple voices, some claiming to be many entities at once. Objects moved on their own. A Bible caught fire, and a crucifix placed on his chest split in two. During one session, scratches across his chest clearly formed the words, I am Legion. Roland revealed intimate secrets about everyone in the room. His every movement was unpredictable, his every voice different, each moment spiraling deeper into horror. At one point, he ripped a metal spring from under the bed and slashed a priest's arm, leaving a bleeding wound. Despite the chaos, the priests persisted. Session after session, lasting more than a month, until finally, one night, Roland calmly opened his eyes and said, "He is gone." He never remembered anything again. The church declared the exorcism successful. Roland Doe returned to a normal life, under a new identity, but those who witnessed it never forgot. The boy, the body, the house, and the evil that manifested there was not human. The case inspired the film The Exorcist, but the real events were far more disturbing. Proof that evil can manifest where you least expect it. Sometimes, all it takes is a board, a boy, and a door that should never be opened. After hearing these stories, Annalisa Michel, Clara Germana, and Roland Doe, it becomes impossible to deny that there are forces which defy any rational explanation. Doctors, psychiatrists, priests, and nuns, all confronted with something far beyond human understanding. But there is something even more terrifying. Something that connects these stories not only through the supernatural, but through the way evil chooses its victims. It's not always a sign. It's not always an open door. Sometimes it is just a whisper, an innocent curiosity, or a presence that creeps closer while you think you're alone. In every case, there are common elements. Entities that seize mind and body. Forces that reveal secrets impossible to know. Increased physical strength and resistance to any human restraint. Supernatural knowledge. Languages never learned. Private information no one could possibly know. And an almost infinite resistance to any attempt at expulsion. And if there's something scarier than the acts themselves, it's the feeling of powerlessness. Doctors are baffled. Parents are driven to despair. Priests temporarily lose their faith. And for the victims, the terror is complete. Their own bodies stop obeying. Their minds cease to be their own. And reality becomes a hostile, unpredictable place. Annalisa died with her fragile body surrounded by rosaries and crucifixes. Clara returned to normal, but her soul carried scars that no one could erase. Roland Doe went on with his life, but those who witnessed the evil never forgot. And the question remains, hanging in the air. Did the evil really leave? Or did it simply change shape, waiting for the next opportunity? Maybe what frightens us most is not possession itself, but the idea that it doesn't need a pre-selected victim to happen again. That a simple curiosity, a board, a door, a misinterpreted prayer can open a path to something that should never have been awakened. And if you think these stories are distant, happening only in foreign countries or old, shadowy houses, think again. Evil sometimes settles in ordinary places, the cities you cross every day, the schools, the quiet bedrooms, the churches you visit on Sundays. And it waits, silent, patient, watching curious hearts, the weak of faith, or those who believe they are protected. So, next time you hear a whisper that no one else seems to hear, maybe it's just your imagination. Or maybe it's something far older, something that does not forget and never forgives. Because what you saw here is not just a story, it's a reminder. Some voices should never be summoned, and some doors should never be opened. It's a silent warning. Evil does not disappear. It moves, it hides, it waits patiently for the next curious one, the next skeptic, the next unwary soul who thinks they are safe. And even if you turn off the light, close the video, and try to convince yourself it's over, they are still out there, waiting. 3 accounts that challenge logic, science, and even faith. 3 cases where reality bends before the inexplicable. Annalise Michel, consumed by forces that even doctors could not contain. Clara German, a teenager who levitated, attacked, and spoke in impossible voices. Roland Doe, a boy whose encounter with the occult inspired one of the most iconic horror films in history. But here's the true terror. They did not remain confined to the pages of history. They continue to lurk, watching. Some voices should never be called. Some gates should never be opened. And sometimes, you don't even realize you're being watched. And the final question remains, echoing in the silence of your room. What if the next story is about you? What would you do if someone, or something, was there, watching, waiting, just to be heard or felt? Tell us in the comments, and until the next story.